The knock came just as the late afternoon sun began to fade across the fields, and what waited on the other side of the door would change two broken lives forever. The woman standing there looked as though she had been carrying the weight of the world for years. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hands trembled around the handle of a worn suitcase. The tears on her cheeks caught the golden daylight, and for a moment it seemed as if time itself had stopped. She looked like someone who had run out of roads, run out of answers, and run out of hope. And when she finally lifted her eyes and quietly admitted that she had nowhere left to go, the silence that followed felt heavier than any storm. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of one small act to change a life, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Ancient Truth for more heartfelt stories. The man standing in the doorway was named Rowan Mercer. He had spent most of his life on the small property he inherited from his grandfather. The modest farmhouse sat on the edge of a quiet rural town surrounded by open fields, winding roads, and endless skies. From the outside, his life appeared peaceful. He had a stable job repairing agricultural equipment, enough land to keep himself busy, and a reputation for being dependable. But appearances often hide the deepest wounds. 5 years earlier, Rowan had lost his wife and young son in a tragic highway accident. One rainy evening had stolen everything he loved. Since then, the farmhouse had become both his refuge and his prison. He worked during the day and returned to empty rooms at night. He avoided gatherings, ignored invitations, and convinced himself that loneliness was safer than risking more loss. The walls of the house had witnessed countless silent dinners, sleepless nights, and moments when grief felt so overwhelming that even breathing seemed difficult. The woman standing outside his door that afternoon was named Elara Whitmore. At 28 years old, she looked older than her age because hardship had carved invisible lines into her spirit. Her pale pink dress was wrinkled from travel. Strands of blonde hair escaped from a hastily tied style. The suitcase she carried looked heavy, not because of what was inside it, but because it represented everything she had left in the world. Only a year earlier, Elara had believed her life was finally coming together. She worked as a teacher's assistant, rented a small apartment, and was engaged to a man she thought she would spend her life with. But life rarely follows the plans we make. Her fiancé accumulated hidden debts and disappeared without warning, leaving her responsible for financial obligations she never knew existed. The stress destroyed her savings. When she fell behind on rent, she lost her apartment. Family members who once promised support were either unable or unwilling to help. One by one, every door closed. For months, she drifted between temporary places. Friends offered couches for a few nights. Cheap motels became occasional shelters. She sold belongings to survive. Eventually, even those options disappeared. The world grew colder each week, and with every rejection, her faith in people faded. The connection between Rowan and Elara was distant but real. Years earlier, Rowan's late wife had volunteered at a community literacy program where Elara had worked as a teenager. They had met only a handful of times, but she remembered the kindness Rowan's family had shown her when she was younger. When every other possibility vanished, one name surfaced in her mind. It was a desperate choice, not because she expected help, but because she had nowhere else to turn. That was what brought her to the farmhouse on that warm afternoon. The moment Rowan opened the door and saw her standing there, suitcase in hand and heartbreak written across her face, he sensed that something was terribly wrong. He noticed the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she clutched the suitcase handle as if letting go might cause her to collapse. He noticed the faint traces of tears and the defeated expression of someone who had spent too many nights wondering how she would survive tomorrow. When she finally confessed that she had nowhere left to go, Rowan felt something inside him shift. For years he had built walls around his heart. Yet standing before him was another soul carrying pain remarkably similar to his own. Different circumstances had brought them there, but loneliness recognized loneliness instantly. Without overthinking, without calculating risks or consequences, he stepped aside and told her she could stay. That simple act changed everything. The first few days felt awkward. Rowan prepared the spare bedroom that had remained untouched for years. Ilara moved quietly through the house, careful not to disturb anything. They shared meals in near silence. Both carried invisible scars. Both feared becoming burdens. Both struggled to trust happiness. Yet small routines slowly began to form. Every morning, Rowan left for work before sunrise. Every evening, he returned to find the house slightly different. A dusty shelf had been cleaned. A neglected garden bed had been weeded. Fresh bread sometimes cooled on the kitchen counter. Ilara wasn't trying to repay him. She simply needed purpose. As weeks passed, conversations became easier. They spoke about books, childhood memories, favorite seasons, and dreams they once had. Gradually, the farmhouse no longer felt like a museum of grief. Laughter returned in small moments. The silence that once haunted every room became less oppressive. For the first time in years, Rowan found himself looking forward to coming home. But healing is never a straight path. Not everyone in town approved of the arrangement. Rumors spread quickly. Some questioned Ilara's intentions. Others whispered that Rowan was being taken advantage of. A few people openly criticized him for allowing a near stranger to live in his home. The gossip hurt more than either of them expected. Ilara felt guilty. She worried she had brought problems into the life of the only person who had shown her compassion. Several times she considered leaving. Each time, Rowan reminded her that the opinions of strangers mattered less than the truth. Still, the whispers planted seeds of doubt. Then another challenge arrived. One evening, Rowan suffered a serious injury while repairing heavy machinery at work. A mechanical failure crushed part of his leg. Although he survived, the recovery would take months. Suddenly, the man who had rescued someone else found himself needing help. Medical bills piled up. Physical therapy consumed time and energy. His ability to work disappeared overnight. For Ilara, leaving was no longer an option. Day after day, she drove him to appointments. She managed household responsibilities. She learned how to handle tasks around the property that she had never imagined doing. She balanced finances, prepared meals, and encouraged him through painful rehabilitation sessions. The woman who had arrived with nothing became the person holding everything together. One rainy evening, months into Rowan's recovery, he sat on the porch watching a storm move across the fields. The same fields that had witnessed years of loneliness now felt strangely alive. Ilara joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. As thunder rolled across the horizon, Rowan realized something profound. The help he had offered her that afternoon had not been one-sided. She had saved him just as much as he had saved her. Without her presence, his injury might have pushed him into despair. Without her friendship, the farmhouse would have remained trapped in the shadows of the past. Sometimes the people we rescue end up rescuing us. The following spring brought unexpected opportunities. Ilara secured a position at the local elementary school. The principal had heard about her dedication and resilience through community connections. Her natural warmth made her beloved among students almost immediately. Meanwhile, Rowan's recovery progressed steadily. Though he would never regain full strength in his injured leg, he adapted. He discovered new ways to work and found satisfaction in mentoring younger mechanics rather than performing every physical task himself. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But for the first time in years, both of them felt hopeful. The farmhouse changed too. Flowers bloomed around the front porch. The neglected garden produced vegetables again. Neighbors who once gossiped began seeing the truth for themselves. They witnessed 2 people rebuilding their lives through kindness, hard work, and mutual respect. Slowly, criticism turned into admiration. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after Alara first arrived, the town organized a community festival. Families gathered in the park. Children laughed beneath bright banners. Music drifted through the air. As Rowan walked through the crowd, he noticed how different everything felt compared to the isolated man he had once been. He saw familiar faces smiling. He saw former skeptics offering friendly greetings. Most importantly, he saw Alara helping children at a reading booth, her face glowing with confidence and joy. For a moment, he remembered the woman standing at his doorstep with a suitcase and tears in her eyes. The contrast was astonishing. She no longer looked defeated. She looked home. But the most emotional moment came several months later. While cleaning the attic, Rowan discovered a box of letters written by his late wife. Among them was a note she had written years before her passing. In it, she reflected on the importance of helping people whenever possible. She wrote that kindness was rarely wasted because even small acts could create ripples that traveled farther than anyone could imagine. Reading those words brought tears to his eyes. It felt as though the woman he had loved was somehow reminding him that compassion had always been the right choice. That evening, Rowan sat on the porch steps as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and orange. Alara joined him, and together they watched the fields sway in the breeze. Neither could have predicted where life would lead them when that suitcase first appeared at the door. Neither knew how many struggles still waited ahead. Yet both understood one simple truth. A single moment of kindness had transformed everything. If this story is touching your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone you care about, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps stories like this reach more people who may need hope today. Years later, townspeople would tell the story differently. Some would say Rowan saved Alara. Others would insist Alara saved Rowan. But those who knew them best understood that neither version was complete. The truth was that two wounded people met at the exact moment they needed each other most. One had lost her home. The other had lost his reason to keep living fully. Together, they found both. And before we reach the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment the word home if you believe that sometimes the greatest gift we can offer another person is simply a place where they feel safe, valued, and loved. As the years continued, the farmhouse became known throughout the community not for tragedy, but for generosity. Rowan and Alara eventually opened their doors to others facing temporary hardship. A spare room became a refuge for people rebuilding their lives. Young adults leaving difficult situations found encouragement there. Families in crisis received support. What began as one act of compassion became a legacy. The old suitcase remained stored in the attic. Alara kept it as a reminder of the day everything changed. Whenever life became difficult, she would look at it and remember the frightened woman who believed she had reached the end of her road. She had been wrong. It wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And perhaps that is the lesson hidden within all our darkest moments. Sometimes the door that closes behind us feels permanent. Sometimes loss convinces us that hope is gone forever. Sometimes we stand trembling at the threshold of someone else's kindness, carrying all the weight of our failures and fears. Yet occasionally, when we least expect it, another human being opens a door and offers grace instead of judgment. A place instead of rejection. A future instead of despair. And that single act can echo through countless lives. The sun was setting when Rowan and Alara stood together on the porch one evening, watching golden light stretch across the same fields that had witnessed their first meeting. The air was calm. The world felt peaceful. No grand speeches were needed. No dramatic promises. Just quiet gratitude for a second chance neither of them expected. Because sometimes the most powerful words are not complicated at all. Sometimes a life changes forever because one person says, "Then stay with me." And sometimes, those 4 simple words become the beginning of a miracle. If this story moved you, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Your engagement helps keep stories of hope, kindness, and second chances alive for people who need them most. Thank you for being part of this journey, and may you never underestimate the power of a single act of compassion.